how's it going? And welcome to the Music Production Podcast, the show about all things making music. I'm your host, Brian Funk. Today, I'm speaking with Jay from The Hymn. Jay is a EDM DJ producer with over 500 million streams on Spotify. He's done lots of great remixes, and he just released a new plugin called Sub Ninja that allows you to see what's going on in the bass frequencies in your mix. It's a really cool plugin, and I don't know of anything else like it. We had an awesome talk about his development of the plugin, how that's affected the way he makes music, some of the trade-offs that happen in that world, and lots of great stuff about getting inspired, about starting new things, about learning. It was a really cool conversation. Jay's a great guy. We had a lot of fun, and I hope you enjoy the episode. Welcome to the show, Jay. Thanks for being here.
What's up? Thank you so much for having me, man.
Yeah, it's great to have you, and congratulations on releasing your first plugin.
Pretty
Sub
crazy,
Ninja.
right? Yeah, thank you so much. It's been a wild ride.
So I have to imagine, yeah, because you come from like a musician, producer background, and I'm guessing that this device came out of some sort of need for you. Like, where is this thing that I want? So I guess I have to build it.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, funny enough, I had something like that I've been using for years and years already. Like I had it, I use Reaper. It's a fairly unknown DAW, but it has like a lot of customizable options, and including in that is like a small scripting language that allows you to make kind of like plugins that run in Reaper. So I hacked together like another scope that was running in there. I put a filter in there and changed some stuff around so that I had something like this. And I literally always have it open on every track on my master, like for the last, maybe 7-8 years or something. So in that way, I was supremely convinced that this is a useful tool because I literally do use it myself all the time. And then I really wanted to make it into a plugin, and I thought it was kind of simple to do, and then to build it out and like to test the waters a little bit on how plugin development would go. Turns out it is actually quite complex, but that's just how these things go. But it's very cool to me that it's now a real thing that everybody can use.
Do you mind just describing it for anyone that's not familiar with Sub Ninja?
Absolutely. So it's basically a scope plugin. So like it's a plugin that shows you the waveform of the audio that's going through it. And I recommend just putting it on your master bus so you can see the waveform of your audio, and like to total beginners that maybe are not as deep into producing yet, it's kind of like when you have an audio file and you just see the lines on your computer. And this will show you, like, for example, I always have it set up for 1 bar. It'll show you the waveform of 1 bar. And then the nice thing that Sub Ninja does, it allows you to only see the waveform for the low frequencies. So there's a low pass filter in there. So you can, for example, only see the frequencies under 100 hertz. And it turns out that this is actually, in my opinion, but I've now also gotten feedback from many, many people that use it. This is the best way to be looking at your bass information, because I know many people are used to, like, for example, maybe looking on a spectrum analyzer, like the thing you'll have in your EQ. And that will bounce up and down a little bit, and it'll give you a little bit of like brief snapshots after each other of what your spectrum, your whole spectrum is looking like. But that's not enough detail to look at the bass at all. And on top of that, like the scope, the waveform will actually show you that information over time. So it will show you everything that's happening over time. It will show you how low the wave is going because you can see how far the waves are apart. And it will show you how loud the wave is in that particular time, because it will be higher or lower. So you can see your kick drums, you can see your bass, you can see how your sidechain is interacting. You can see if there's things overlapping, if there's too much bass in something. Basically in one frame, in one full picture, you can see right away what is going on in your bass. It's like kind of like poking your head underwater, and looking like what is going on. And these frequencies can just be really hard to hear, like especially in small studios, not optimal acoustics, and even in a great studio and great acoustics, it can still be difficult to get the bass right. And it's not this is a long pitch, but for me, it's exceptionally useful in showing you what is going on in your bass.
For me, like, as I've been learning and throughout my life. Like once I finally got a computer that showed me the EQ spectrum and the frequencies, I was really fascinated by it to see like, oh, this is what's happening. And then my initial thought would be like, well, I guess I probably want them all even. I want them all to be like the same volume. That would
Yeah.
sound balanced. You'd think that, but that doesn't really sound good when you actually do it that way. So
Right.
by like just watching songs that I like the mixes of on the EQ spectrum just taught me so much.
Yeah.
But you're right, you're only seeing what's happening in the moment.
Yeah.
It's just right now this is what's happening.
Yeah.
But what is cool about Sub Ninja is that it shows it scroll by
Yeah.
and that you can actually see it, but you can also just see that bass stuff. And that is one of the hardest things I find to get right because it changes so much. I mean, especially I'm not in the most professionally treated place right now. And I think it sounds pretty good where I sit, but if I move at all, everything changes, and especially in the bass. And there's certain times I like to walk around the room sometimes as I listen just to get a sense of how the sound changes in the
Yeah.
different spots. And there are certain places I can stand where there's either no bass or it's like thunder.
Yeah.
And without something else to kind of give me a little more information, it can be really tricky to know, like, where do I want this to work? Where do I want it to sound the best? Where do I want
Yeah.
it to, you know,
But
it's the same thing. Like,
The great thing, Brian, is you're already aware of this problem. So like the things you are explaining now to me are already super advanced in terms of like you are aware that actually the bass that you're hearing in your room is not really equivalent to what is probably present in your track, you know, and like you can notice that by walking around. Like that is great. But you know, like I think that already is kind of a realization that took me a while to like figure out, hey man, like what I hear might not actually be what is going on, you know?
yeah, well, that's the first thing I think you learn when you make a mix and then you bring it into another system or your car or you play it somewhere
Yeah.
else and you're like, what? Like, this
Yeah.
isn't what I made.
Yeah,
It's totally different.
Yeah, very familiar.
So I think it's a funny thing you said that you thought it'd be relatively simple
Yes.
to translate this. And turns out, of course, it's not, right? There's way more that goes into this stuff. Do you think that was actually a benefit for you, like an advantage in that? Because if you would have realized how hard it was, would you have still went ahead and done it?
No, and the cool thing about this whole process of diving into building my own plugins and doing all that work is that it's like also got me thinking again about my music, you know, because I've been producing for a while, and this might be familiar to you as well, but you kind of like lose those beginner's eyes, you know, like when I start on a project, I kind of already know where it's going, maybe, and I might be, you know, less optimistic about it. Whereas when you're a beginner and you don't really know all the ways you're gonna fail, you're just like, oh, this is gonna be freaking great, you know, I'm gonna do it, and I'm just gonna go at it and do this and do that, and then, yeah, as you go along, you know, it turns out that everything takes like, well, I want to say like 5 times as much time as you think. Like there's been many things that I thought were going to take like 2 days and took at least 2 weeks.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's so true about so many things.
Yes.
Even if you're getting like work done on part of your home or something.
Yeah.
The estimate is
the
always
home is the worst.
so optimistic.
Yeah.
But it's so true about like creative projects too, where you kind of think you're going to be able to get through it pretty quick. But
Yeah.
yeah, when you're first starting out, you don't know what you don't know. So
Exactly.
you don't know that like, oh, I could mess up the bass frequencies in my mix, or I might have phasing. Like you have to make a lot of these mistakes before you realize that they're mistakes you can even make.
Yeah. And it's interesting that you know, like the coin always has 2 sides. Like on the one side, that can cause you some frustrations along the route, but it can also be that small thing that gives you that like a little bit of craziness that you need to go through. Because at the end of the day, if you just keep pushing through all those hurdles, then yeah, you're gonna end up way further than you ever thought you would, you know. So that is really cool to see again in a different field for myself.
Right. Yeah, that's what I'm kind of getting at.
Yeah.
The fact that like you didn't know how long and winding the road was.
Yeah.
You get on it like, okay, here we go. No big deal.
I'm in the middle of one of those things right now, because I've decided that I wanna have an update out for Sub Ninja very soon that is faster than the version 1. That's much faster in drawing, because when I built the first version, I tested it a lot on my own MacBook, which is fast, and like I never had any problems. And now I have like thousands and thousands of users, and like there's people running it on slower machines, and they might want to run 2 at a time. I don't know why, or 4 at a time, but they might want to. So now I'm all of a sudden like, oh man, I wish it was much faster. So like I already know that there's gonna be like I'm working on a version that's much faster than V1. But dude, I thought that was going to be like 1 or 2 days, and I'm like 2 weeks in, and I'm like, oh my God, where's the end of this? So again, maybe you just need that craziness to get there. It's a gift and a curse.
Yeah. It's good. Sometimes what we don't know is what saves us.
Very true. Very true.
A lot of things, I think, I don't know if I would have got involved if I would have known how involved I needed to get.
Exactly, man. Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
So do you find yourself like buying old computers now with like slower systems? And
yes, well, not buying, but like I have a habit of keeping my old production laptops, and kind of leaving them in the state that I had them. So like I literally am here looking at my old Windows laptop. It's like Windows 10, I think, on there. So I can do some tests on there to see like, okay, what's going on. And then, I might even try it on some older machines. Yeah.
Yeah, just to make sure.
Yep.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think in music too, there's a lot of people that kind of stick to what works, right? Like, hey, my system's working, so I'm going to stay on, the old version of the software. I'm not going to update. I'm on Mac, but I'm still not on the latest version of the OS, because I'm kind of like, I don't know, I get this old interface that's working great, and I don't know what's going to happen on the next jump.
Yeah.
So you sort of have to account for that.
I know that pain very well. And especially I went from Windows to Mac like a few years back, and the whole M1 question mark of if all the plugins were going to work. But I do think like at a certain point, I talked to a lot of DJ friends that have exactly the same problem. I had one friend of me, I sent him Sub Ninja, and I was like, oh, you got to check it out. It's like so cool. I really want to try this. And he's like texting me like, oh, it's not working. And I'm like, what the hell? Why is it not working? Like my mind was really blown. And then I started asking him, what version are you on? And he's like, on a way old like version of Mac OS that I don't support anymore. I don't fully know why I don't support it, but I know like the framework I use has certain limitations. Still something on my to-do list to look into, but I know this fear. But I do want to say like getting free from that, or at least a little bit freer from that, especially in like a professional setting, is nice and important in my mind, because at the end of the day, your computer might crash and burn today, and you might want to get back to work tomorrow. So, it is a bit of a balance of doing that, but also a huge pain to update everything and try to get it to work.
Yeah, and I guess too, you mentioned like the M1 thing, and there was like Rosetta I was using for a while to kind of translate, I guess, the old versions of the plugins and stuff into the new stuff. So there's probably a lot of people still kind of like sitting on that sort of edge of I'm going into the new thing, but I'm still kind of here in the old one.
Yeah, no,
and
totally true.
For you to come in at this point, is it just let's stick with the new? Do you go back further to those older pre-M1?
Well, I support pre-M1 for sure. I support, I think, I want to say up to like 11 or 10 or something macOS. So I'm definitely back a decent way. If I have more time, I would definitely also consider looking into what it would take to build it for those older systems. Because, often with software development, like this is built by geeks like myself, and like we want to make sure everything works, so a lot of the time it's changing a few lines and it should still be possible. But yeah, right now with the onslaught of the launch and the updates I got to focus on where like the most people are going to be served. So like it's on my to-do list.
Yeah.
If I could, I would.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I can relate to that on a much simpler level. Like I do a lot of instrument packs for Ableton Live.
Yeah.
And there's like, well, what version should I make it in? Like they're about to release 12, Live 12. So do I make it in 10? Do I 11? Do I, because like once you pick one, you can't go back.
Oh, yeah.
So
yeah, there you go.
Anything in 10 won't work in 9.
And do you know where your customer base is?
Well, to some degree, but no, not completely. And I know that there's a lot of people that are still way back. I get an email every once in a while, like, will this work in 8 or 9? Or I think recently even 7. I was like, no.
I can't go back that
I don't think I was making stuff when 7 was out. But it's always kind of that question I have, like, do I want to throw in these new little bells and whistles I can do with the newer version?
Yeah.
Or do I make it in the older version so that more people can use it?
Yeah, man. Like, so what's your answer?
Well, I'll do kind of sometimes 2 things, right? So if it's integral to the thing I'm trying to build, then you have to use the newer version.
Yeah.
If I can kind of do like half of it in, say, an older version, and kind of get something like that'll work, I'll do that, and then maybe I'll take it to the next level in another version of it.
Yeah.
So you can have like the older version for, like, say, Live 10, but if you want all the features, you'll need 11, and you'll use this version instead.
Yeah. But I think it's a good solution.
Beyond that, I'm not going earlier than 10 anymore, just because there's only so much time in a day.
Yeah. Have you played with the 12 beta?
Yes.
What's your thoughts? Do you like it?
Yeah, I've had it for quite some time now. I really like it. I use it mostly. There's a lot of great new features. A lot of the MIDI editing is really nice. There's some cool new transformers and generators that can just really get your ideas going. So it's great when you're kind of not sure what to do and you just need a little nudge so you can play with that stuff. Some cool new devices, nice updates to the look. I'm still getting used to the new browser system. I've gotten so comfortable with the old way, and they did make some pretty significant changes. So now it feels, unknown. And I haven't really dove completely into some of the new features on it, just out of fear that if they change it, like there's this new tagging thing they have and filtering your tags and stuff. So I didn't want to dive too far into that, because if they change it, I'll lose all my work of tagging everything, So there's that thing too. If you're using like a beta, how much do you want to lean on it? Because things can change, in the next release, and then you're just kind of,
Yeah.
But I'm excited for when it actually releases so that I can just be all in.
Yeah. Yeah, cool. I used to be a big Ableton user, and I couldn't help myself but buy the 12 license when on like I don't know, they always do one of these pre-enrollment programs. So I did do that. I'm definitely curious to check it out, and maybe start getting back into Ableton a little bit, because I do miss some features of it. I really loved it as a program.
Are you using Reaper then?
Yeah.
Have you ever seen a lot of people? I've never used it, no. But and here's the thing I've kind of like, I don't know if this is even right, but the kind of connection I make in my head is Reaper seems to be more for people that want like complete control and freedom, kind of like the way I think about like Mac and Windows people. Like, I use a Mac because I don't want to worry about the computer so much. I want to work and have the computer sort of be in the background. But I have friends that are more into like programming and coding, and they want that stuff front and center. So I don't know if that's the right way to look at it, but that's always sort of how I've seen that in my head anyway. But
there's some truth to it. I think, I don't really know how to put it. What I think, let me say this. What is great about Reaper is that you have endless ways to customize things. You can, everything can have a shortcut. You can make macros. You can even program your own scripts. I have a bunch of custom scripts. I have a bunch of custom visual things. Endless customization. Really, anything you can think of, pretty much, you can do. It's fast. It's stable. It has all the geek features. So, like when we were talking about the moving from the this version to the that version, I don't know how long this has been in Reaper, but I can like load different plugin versions in different projects and in different ways. So like I'm never too worried that something's not going to work. I tested this out before I updated as well. And then, you know, like that is really nice because even before the M1 thing, it wasn't always sure if like VST3 was working in Ableton or something. I don't even freaking remember. But back then, everything would always work in Reaper. So that's a great benefit. So that's amazing. The biggest downside to me is that a lot of things are aesthetically not as pretty. So like they have left some things just kind of like the default operating system menus and stuff, which I just think is off-putting and it's not nice for a creative process. And I do think it's really important for user experience. And because it's so customizable, everything is different for everybody. So if I was working with somebody that had Ableton, we could both just interchangeably work because your shortcuts are my shortcuts, and like we know how the system works. You know, that's why it's kind of like Apple. But with Reaper, my whole keyboard is going to be set up different from anybody else using Reaper, and there's ways to like swap in and out like shortcut sets, but nobody wants to do that. So It's like you have endless possibilities. It's a great program. If you're like down in the weeds and you wanna have all the options, go for it. It's freaking amazing. But yeah.
Yeah, I could see how that's both good and bad.
Yeah.
Sometimes that freedom lets you do like crazy, unique stuff. That's all you. But it is also kind of nice to be invited into a bit of a workflow.
Yes, I agree.
There's a lot of devices, instruments and tools I have here that I really like that it only sort of does like the one thing it does, but it does it well. And there's other things that does everything. And it's like, I don't even know how to get around this thing. It becomes a bit overwhelming.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, like we could talk for 3 hours about the differences between these programs, and I have so many opinions about it, and like I would find it hard to recommend any program to anybody for particular reasons. But I gotta say, like Reaper is so awesome, and it really deserves much more users and people to be excited about it than they have. But I also see the drawbacks for people. You know, I get it. I get both sides of it.
Yeah, and at the end of the day, I think it's what you know, right? Like where you're comfortable.
Totally, yeah.
I certainly know people that have either like stuck to the old software or just use like antiquated gear, but they're really good at it and they know how to get results out of it.
Yeah, that's the most important. It's just a tool to like help you make music.
Yeah, I think as like producers ourselves, we think that stuff's much more important than it is. You know, we might listen to a song by an artist we love and wonder like, well, how'd they make that? What software did they use? What synths are they using? Which kind of guitar is that? But the average person doesn't, even before I got into recording, I wasn't thinking about that stuff. I thought about guitar playing, but I wasn't even thinking about like, what kind of drums are those? It's just, I guess when you're deep in the weeds like that, those are the things you think about and that you think matter, but it's the result is what counts.
Yeah. It's, oh man, Brian, you're dragging me down. You're dragging me into the weeds. I totally agree with like, I totally agree with you. But then there's also this part of me that is like, oh man, but if you can optimize your workflow in certain ways, that can be like huge in terms of not getting you out of the flow. And that has like also benefited me greatly. So like I kind of have this running gag with myself. Like I'm also into home automation stuff. So like I have a lot of home automation stuff at home. And You can, there's this open platform called Home Assistant. You might know it's really cool. And I often like joke to myself, like I've already spent so much more time programming my whole smart home than any of these automatic lights or alarm systems or anything are ever going to save me, you know?
Right.
It's the same with Reaper. Like I've spent so much time like customizing everything. That's more than it's ever going to save me. But that feeling of like, you know, hitting one button when I want my EQ with automation right in front of me, or I want my favorite reverb with automation on the dry wet right on the track with one button, and that keeps me in the process in that moment, that can also be very valuable.
Yeah. That's funny you mentioned that too, the home automation, because I recently did very minimal. I can now come down to my studio here and tell Siri to like turn it on, turn it off, and instead of flipping on like all these switches. And because as silly as it sounds, and it makes me feel like such a lazy person, sometimes the thought of turning on like 6 switches and then like setting up a stupid microphone, say, is enough to make me not do it sometimes.
Exactly. And that is, if you can pass that hurdle and make that less, like more frictionless, like as frictionless as possible, that is a very valuable thing.
Yeah.
So
but I will
like
say that
sorry, go ahead.
I was just to finish that thought. The night I set up that system, I thought that was going to be like a short thing, and then I was going to make music, and I just spent the whole night making the
there you go.
automation. I didn't even touch the software or any instruments.
Well, one of my best friends, I'm in this big creative building with lots of creatives, and he used to be in a studio right next to me. He's a photographer, like a fashion photographer, and now does a lot of 3D stuff. He made the 3D intro for Sub Ninja as well. And he used to come over here and like walk past my door and knock on the door, and like we'd have coffee for hours. And I don't know what the English word for that would be, but like we'd sit on the couch and like talk about like kind of procrastinating our work, but also how important that can sometimes be, where you like, you know, you kind of go through that motion of putting it off, but actually maybe your subconscious is already kind of thinking about it and getting things ready and preparing. I am a huge believer in that. So don't see it all as wasted time.
Yeah. Well, that's the funny thing about it, right? Like you can really avoid the work by doing cable management and making sure everything's connected and cleaning up and rearranging. But you also get a lot back from that too.
Yeah.
And it's I guess it's important to just be honest with yourself. What are you actually doing? Is this necessary, or are you avoiding the task?
Yeah.
But as you said, sometimes just doing that stuff lets the ideas kind of ferment in your mind a little bit and play around and straighten themselves out.
Exactly. And to me, like the difference is, are you like exactly what you're saying? Are you honest with yourself? You know, it's like the difference between the person that is going to the gym every day, but is just having coffees there and talking. Yeah. Then you're going to the gym and then you're not doing anything there.
That's it. 4 hours.
Yeah, exactly. Then nothing is happening. But if you actually go there and like, okay, you know, maybe some days you don't do anything and you're chatting and you're making friends. But like, if you are using those friends the next time to come back to train harder, that's when it's useful. And that's the distinction, you know? So like if somebody was like just telling me how they got the most perfect setup but never made a song, then you're on the wrong side of that balance that you need to strike. Both things are really important.
Yeah. Yeah. And I guess there's, you know, evidence that some of that's so extra. I was talking recently on a podcast and they were telling me about somebody that was working on an album, and I guess like their system crashed, you know, and in order to finish the album, they went to the Apple store with the USB stick and put it into Logic and was just like kind of working at those computers for as long as they until they caught him basically. Yeah. And then he just kind of come back later. But like there's like the other end of that where just I'm gonna get the work done.
Yeah, man. Yeah. And you also need that.
Do what you gotta do.
Also need that mindset, and that, you know, you also need to finish sometimes, for real. It's super important.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. The thing we get the least amount of practice doing is the finishing part.
Yeah. Like, you mean the finishing of the songs?
Yeah, yeah, that whole end process. We
Yeah.
start them all the time, right?
Yeah,
And
yeah.
after a while, you get good at that. But
Yeah.
to get to the end of the race, that's the hardest place to be.
Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. Especially when you don't have like real world deadlines, you know. Like I was last week I was doing a podcast with these Dutch guys, also dance producers, artist coaching, Joe Izuki and Jay Hardway, and we were talking about this thing as well, where, you know, like finishing tracks, that's like so important if you're a beginner, and if you want to learn how to make music fast, give yourself like a deadlines. You know,
Yeah.
doesn't matter if it's perfect or not. Like, finish the things up to where it's a whole thing, and that, like you said, like that might be the thing we get the least practice in. But if you can take any idea and finish that into a song, like you could give me any 8-bar loop and I could make that into a song to you. Like, if I've done a lot of remixes, and yeah, you know, they have deadlines. It's easier when other people give you deadlines, because then you feel the pressure. It's much easier. But like I would just know, you know, like I take a week to make the remix, and I knew at the end of the week it was going to be done. It might not be perfect, might not be my favorite remix, but it was going to be done.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and actually, I think as you go along, I'm totally off on a tangent now, I'm sorry, but I think if you go along long enough, you'll find out that, you know, what might be like a 6.5 for you, because you're so like deep into it and you don't even freaking know left from right anymore, then maybe actually it's actually good in the real world. It's good enough. Or like, I don't really like saying that, because that makes it sound like, oh, I'm just half-assing things as long as it's good enough. That's not how I perceive it. But sometimes we're probably all more perfectionistic than we need to be. So sometimes we just got to be like, hey man, this is good enough. On to the next one.
Yeah, that's a good point, because there is, I think we all have that, right? That perfectionism. And if not, we at least have like the critic that will come in and be like, "Ooh, I don't know. Are people going to like this? Is this good enough? Is this smart enough? Did you clean it up enough?" When you're working on like those types of deadlines, how do you get around that? Because like you said, sometimes you don't know which way's up and down, left and right. You're too close to it almost.
Yeah, man. I mean, I've said in the past that my songs are finished either when I stop working on them or when I die, you know, like, because you can always keep tweaking. But yeah, the thing is, like, okay, so just to give you like a real answer, how I really think about it, and it's not maybe like the most obvious one-liner there is, but you need to strike that balance between being that guy in a gym that goes there to do nothing, and the person in the gym that goes there to train, you know? Like, I need to strike a balance between finishing tracks and making new stuff and exploring. And those are different things. You don't need to have like different time schedules for it, but like when I have a remix request assignment, then there is a deadline, you know? Like, when you do this professionally, you cannot spend limitless time on every track that you make, because this is your job, you know? And I've gotten now to the point where that's just so ingrained in me, because that's, what I learned. But way in the beginning, there was a time when I was doing bootlegs and like remix competitions. And like one of the first things that got the hymn started was a remix competition for Tiesto. And the idea was to make that in 24 hours. So like I would make the track, mix the track, master the track, all in 24 hours. I think that they started at like 9 o'clock and ended at like 2 o'clock, but then it was done and it was handed in, and it got second place, I think.
Nice.
And it was one of the first times I thought like, hey man, shit, this is like, this is something real. People like this has value in a way, you know? But that was an arbitrary deadline. Like I was just busy doing other things as well. So I thought like this needs to happen in a short time frame. This is all I have, and it's just gonna happen, you know. And this is something anybody can do. Anybody can give themselves a deadline. I'm gonna finish one track a week, one track a day, one track a month. It doesn't matter what it is, as long as you make that deadline for yourself and stick to it. And it doesn't need to be perfect, like this is that the whole inner struggle is real. I have that too. Everybody has that. But if you have that bigger goal of like, I'm actually learning how to finish this. I'm not learning how to make the perfect song because that's never going to happen. I am practicing now finishing stuff. And then that's what you got to set out to do.
I like that way of thinking, like just the practice finishing.
Yeah.
I recently had somebody in my Discord for my music production club say something like, yeah, I can't make songs. I can't do it. I'm like, my response was, I bet you could make really bad songs.
Yeah, there you go.
Make terrible songs.
Yeah.
And I think that was one of the first episodes I ever did of this podcast, was just called Make Bad Music. Like, just for the sake of getting through the practice. And it's like, I guess, it's why sports teams will have scrimmages, that don't count. It's just a matter of going through the game, getting the practice in. And if you lose, who cares? But it's so important to just know what it's going to look like when you get there, when you get to the next stage and what's going to happen next, to just get the practice. So even making songs that aren't good, that you don't like, aren't failures. They're just... they have reps at the gym,
Yeah, exactly.
Maybe they weren't your personal best, bench press, but you still did a bench press.
Exactly.
You didn't go backwards. You didn't stay the same. You moved forward a little bit.
Yeah, no, that's so well put. Like making, like sometimes that's just the assignment you got to give yourself, make a shitty track, make a shitty song. I do that too. I make them inadvertently, but I also give myself the maybe like the assignment or like the permission to make something bad. And then, you do that often enough, then something good might pop out.
Yeah. Yeah, you have to have that permission is a good way to put it. Like, allow yourself. That's where I get stuck, is as soon as I start questioning if it's any good, if I'm doing it right, or if people are going to like it, or is it, I always think about like, is it clever enough? Oh, these chords are too common. I always get hung up on that,
Yeah.
And the funny thing is, so much of what I love is so simple musically. It's maybe got a thing or two that's interesting, but basically, first month of music theory covers what they're doing in these songs.
Yeah.
But it's so funny that a lot of if you just kind of follow through on ideas too, they almost always reveal something interesting can happen from it. I've seen it in myself when I force myself to do it, but I've especially seen it watching friends or other people that are working on a song where I might actually think like, that's a bad idea. It's dumb. Just try something new. And then the next time I hear it, it's great.
Yeah.
It's so much better. It's so funny how often that happens, and whether it's from me doing it and just following through or watching someone else do it.
Yeah.
That it makes me feel like you just never, ever know.
Yeah. And it's so hard, man. It's so hard to do that right, to get that balance right. Like I do, or I used to do definitely a lot of like writing sessions with songwriters and to get songs, and then like often, especially in the beginning, I would like be halfway, in the first hour thinking, this is total crap. Like it's not going to happen. Yeah. But I've learned like that one of the best things you can do is just like go with it, man. And then just say like, oh, why don't we record this one? Because like people, that's how you keep going, like maybe they needed to get that out of the system to get to the next song. You don't know what sparks that next idea. And like, just like you said, your friend might play you something that you think like, this is total crap. But then next week, actually, you hear the variation on what spawned from that little bit of crap. And that could be a great song, like that. That's just how this weird creativity thing works.
Yeah. Yeah. It's it's so funny that it's like, I guess just the future is unknown, right? Like anything can happen. And that's just the way these songs work.
Absolutely.
I hope people aren't getting tired of me mentioning this, but, in January, I do the January challenge to make something every single day.
Nice.
And the beauty of it is, it's just that like you just usually don't have time to decide if you like it or not.
Yeah.
You don't have that luxury. It's like
Yeah.
you're running out of time. It's getting late. You got to finish it.
Yeah.
Just you got to see it through. You got to get it to some presentable point, you know.
Yeah.
And the bar is really low. It doesn't have to be a finished song or anything. But man, it blows my mind when I listen back to some of that stuff, and I'm like, well, you know, I really thought this was junk when I was making it, and I was just trying to get it done. But like, I kind of like it. There's something nice about it. There's something interesting going on here, and also just the sense of satisfaction that it's not impossible.
Yeah,
you can do it.
Exactly. And great challenge. Everybody that wants to be serious about making music should try stuff like that.
That's got the deadline every day.
There you go. You know, and it's gonna hurt, and some stuff is gonna suck. And I'm pretty sure there's also research out on like that actually the most successful creatives are usually also the people that produce the most things, so they have more to pick from. Again, this is all definitely a balancing act, and it's never as simple. But yeah, I would be great for me to do something like that again as well soon.
Yeah, most of my favorite people that talk about songwriting and music production talk about it just like it's this everyday thing. You just show up and put in the work. You don't wait till you're inspired. You just, maybe you got to find it. You got to sort of hunt it down and just see it through.
Yeah.
And,
it's like fishing, you know?
Yeah, like you got to be at the pond, right? You can't be at home being like, oh, it'd be great to catch a fish right now.
It would be great, but it's definitely not going to happen when you're sitting on the couch. Yeah.
Jeff Tweedy from Wilco has a new book, fairly new, where he talks about like songs that affected him throughout his life, good or bad. And some of the songs he talks about he doesn't even like. But one song he talks about was Dolly Parton's "I Will Always Love You," the one that Whitney Houston did. Mm-hmm. And the thing that just stuck with me is like she wrote that the same day she wrote Jolene. So it was this one day. Like Dolly Parton sat down and busted out two like timeless classic songs that people still know and love today and have been covered, probably, you know, have set up generations of her family, you know, financially, right?
Yeah.
What if she didn't show up that day? What if she was tired or just, you know, decided to do something else, you know, watch TV or something?
Yeah, but Brian, let's be real. We don't know. Maybe she stayed home the day before and that's why she wrote those bangers the next day.
It's true, yeah.
I don't know. No, it's
she showed up the day the fish were biting, though.
She definitely did. Yeah, and one thing is for sure: if you don't go fishing, you're not going to catch anything.
Yeah.
Yeah. I always find it so hard. Like I've definitely come to learn that I'm very much an advice seeker. So like I've read a lot of books and listened to podcasts, and like I love learning about creativity and. So like a lot of the things we're talking about and we're thinking about and you're talking about and mentioning, like they really hit close to home. But I've also learned much more that in different phases of my creative life, the opposite advice can be the advice that I need. So I'm always a little bit hesitant to even say like, oh, you got to show up every day to go fishing, you know, because maybe the person listening to this right now actually needs to hear from us, hey man, or
take a break.
Like, yeah, man, you've been fishing like 5 weeks straight and it's not biting. That's fine. You need maybe you need to take a breath. And I think probably it's gonna sound very lame, but probably the most wisdom is coming from knowing in which phase you are yourself.
That's great advice there, that your advice doesn't always apply that you receive. Yeah. And sometimes if you're showing up every day, maybe you're getting stuck in a rut and a pattern, that a little space will allow you to try something new.
Exactly. Yeah.
I recently came across something, because I'm the same way. I like to learn about learning and
Mhm.
getting advice and all of that, thinking like one day I'm going to get the secret answer, right? That will help me forever. But it was about practicing. How
Mhm.
people that practice um, for short periods of time and then take a break and then practice again for short periods of time, take a break, wind up um, like what do you call it? Retaining and growing with
Mhm.
that practice a lot faster than the people that will sit down for like 3 hours
Mm.
nonstop and work on it. There's something about that taking short breaks, every couple minutes to just kind of let it set in and then coming back.
Yeah.
And I felt that in my own playing, in my own songwriting. Sometimes when I take a break, when I come back, I'm a little fresher, a little
Yeah.
more apt to try something new or more excited even. Sometimes it's
Yeah.
just, you just need a little break to get excited again.
Yeah. Yeah, I totally agree. I would again say in this example, the hardest part is knowing when you need that break, uh,
Mm-hmm.
and when you need to stick it out. And I can tell you, I suck at that.
Yeah.
I always go on too long to the point where I'm like completely over it and like, oh, it starts feeling annoying and like a chore. And then, yeah, I think it's probably also part of my creative experience, at least, that it goes in waves and ups and downs. And um, yeah, you gotta still have that mentality of keep on going with the whole project. Um, but yes, sometimes learning involves taking it in bite-sized chunks and taking breaks. And might also be times where it actually means no, now you just gotta grind.
Mm.
And to know which is which, I don't know, man. If you could tell me, like when I was saying it would be wisdom to know which part you should pick, I was meaning I don't know.
Yeah.
I absolutely suck at this. So that's a
That's
hard
hard to
one.
know. Um,
Yeah.
I think that's why back traditionally, like we had producers and people like that to tell you, like almost like you have like a
Yeah.
trainer at a gym. They'll be like, "No, you need to push harder," or "Now it's time to rest."
Yeah.
You
Yeah. Fair
kind of
enough.
need some sort of direction there. But
Yeah.
now we're doing that all ourselves, so
Yeah.
you need to kind of like let go of yourself so that you can get creative, but you also need to be in touch with yourself to know.
Yeah.
And there's so many opposing things.
Yeah. Yeah. It's kind of like meditating, like sitting down and trying not to think. Like it's
I'm
crazy.
thinking
It's
about not
impossible.
thinking.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's the same with this. What
Yeah.
would be your like biggest challenge that you are like that you face on a regular or that you are in right now? Like how do you perceive that in the creative process?
Um, I don't know, because I feel like every single part of it is hard. That's where I'm at right now. Like
Yeah.
starting is hard, finishing is hard, sticking with it is hard, staying focused is hard. Um, I think that I'm trying to just remind myself that it's always like the first part of everything that's hard for me,
Mhm.
whether it's actually getting started or moving on to the next part. Like say I've got like a loop I'm working on, I might be feeling real good, but like, all right, now let's come up with some place for this to go. All these transitional moments, I think, are where I get hung up.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm dividing things into stages too much, or
What are
uh,
stages for you then? You mean
oh, I
between
don't
like
know.
mixing and recording and editing or
Yeah, I guess writing, recording. Sometimes I'm doing them all at once. A lot of times I'm doing them all at once, actually. So there's a lot of switching gears, I guess, and that's tricky.
yeah.
That's where every time you switch, I think you run the risk of like falling off the track a little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't
Yeah.
know. And you've kind of said it already, but like this stuff is still hard for you, and and everyone I talk to says it's hard, you know, so
Yeah.
I take a little bit of comfort in that. Not that I
Yeah.
want my suffering to be wished upon anybody,
Yeah.
but it is kind of nice to know that these things are hard and that's part of it.
Yeah.
So I'm at my best when I realize that in the moment.
Yeah.
When I like, yeah, this is hard, but that's good. We
Yeah.
want this to be hard, you know. If it
Yeah.
was easy, it wouldn't matter. If it was easy, anyone could do it. And if it was easy when you did it, what would be
It
the
would be
big deal?
worthless. Yeah.
Yeah. So, and if it was easy, I'm probably not learning anything either. So every time it gets hard is kind of a good thing.
Yeah.
But that's when I can remember that in the moment. I need a sign, you know?
Yeah.
Like
That
something,
just says like,
I need to sum it up. Like if it's difficult, it's good. Or if you're struggling,
well,
that's
there
good.
are some of those, like the obstacles, the way kind of thought, and
Right.
I don't know if it's kind of like
that's Ryan Holiday's book.
Yeah,
right? Yeah.
I think I might have read it. It's not that I'm not really recommending that book, but I'm more meaning like that idea is out there, and there's definitely a lot of truth in there. You know, like usually where you feel the most resistance, that's probably where the most growth is as well.
Yeah.
And also a lot of opportunity for, like, you know, the satisfaction of overcoming that. That resistance. There's this great book by Stephen, the War of Art. It's over there. So what's his last name again? Pressfield, yes, great book. He talks about the resistance, and I've read it a bunch of times, and it always gives me a little bit of that jolt again. Like, you know, it's the enemy that you gotta fight, and like I think that's what you're kind of naming as well. Like that obstacle, that resistance. That's what you're up against.
Right, and I love that he put it to a name, resistance, capital R.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
Proper noun, and it's a force that stops you from doing it. I love that book. I've read it so many times. I listened to it. He's got a great audiobook, and it's got it's got almost like military music, like in the background sometimes.
I need to get that.
Because his voice it's like a coach kind of kicking your ass a little bit.
Yeah, sometimes you need that. Yeah, absolutely.
Like, cut the shit. Let's do this.
Yeah,
it's a good one.
Yeah,
definitely one of my favorites. I think probably I've given that to a lot of people as a gift. Like I was like, you got to read this. Like, just kind of change your life a little bit.
Yeah. Any other books?
Well, I just finished, and this is just the most recent one on my mind. A book called he wrote Essentialism, but this one is called Effortless. Greg McEwen, I believe, is the name.
Sounds very familiar.
In the show notes. And again, like some of the things we're talking about, he mentions this idea of effortless, that you want to make the productive things in your life easier to do and the non-productive things harder to do. You know, like kind of just, it's easier to do this thing. But, you know, one thing he talks about is be willing to make garbage, be willing to fail, be willing to all that. But he was, what was it saying? This idea, like you want to do enough where you're making some progress, but you also need like an end time too. Which is something I'm really enjoying thinking about, like kind of leaving something on the table. Like I don't want to work too hard today so that I can't do anything tomorrow. And I want to also sort of leave myself hanging a little bit so I'm excited to start tomorrow.
Yeah.
I think Ernest Hemingway used to do that. I think he used to...
Where you stop mid-sentence or something.
Yeah, right. Yeah. I think that was...
Is that working for you?
I do think that helps, because it's kind of like... I don't have to think about where I'm going to pick up the next day.
Yeah.
And that sometimes is a really big hurdle. I spend a lot of time like wandering around considering the things I could do next.
Yeah.
Whether it could be a lot of things. It could be like household chores, or it could be musically what I'm going to do next. But to just be sort of, all right, this is the next thing. without that question, without that thought of like, should I do this now?
Yeah.
I just, this is what's next. And then you're not questioning it, because if I decide, yeah, I'm going to do this, oh man, maybe I should have done the other thing.
Yeah.
You know, like that. So then you never really get into the thing you're actually doing.
Yeah. Very interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, I enjoyed that one a lot. Effortless was, it actually took me, I listened to it. So I don't know how many pages, but it was probably about like an hour and a half into it. And I was almost ready to just be like, I don't need this right now. You know, sometimes things just don't grab you. But once I got to that point, I was like, oh wait, that was good. I'm going to get something out of this.
Yeah. Oh, that's cool. Yeah. Glad you stuck through it.
Mm. Now let me ask you, like, taking on this plugin making job, that must have taken up a lot of your time, and I bet that was a break from music, right? Did that must have taken away some of your time? Did you find pursuing something else like that? It's got a musical thing to it, obviously, but there's a lot of much different skills. And
Yeah.
how did that affect your whole flow? And did it change the way you make music? Did it give you like some of that fresh air and time to breathe a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. I think I, like somewhere last year, somewhere in 2023, we're 2024 right now, right? Like I'm to the point where I started losing the years. Somewhere at the beginning of last year, I was like, I really need to do something else than just making music. Like I was kind of feeling a little stale. Like the music felt a little stale. What I was doing felt a little stale. And it felt like this kind of loop of, next release. Like, you know, not as inspired anymore. So I just kind of picked up the audio program thing on the side and just exploring a little bit if there was anything interesting there. And then I started catching some steam and seeing that some of the things that I wanted to make were possible and how they were possible. And I am there has been a period in my life where I could really combine the two things, where I was like doing some programming and some making music, because I was always already kind of making scripts for Reaper and improving my workflow in there, and you know, doing a little bit of both in that way. But then it was always much more focused on, I got this idea for my workflow that I want to improve. You know, let's make that and then use it, and that kind of went back and forth. But with the plugin making, there was definitely a big period where it was just like, okay, actually, if I'm honest, it's like now 80% making plugins and 20% making music. And I'm now even worse, like the last couple of months, it's more like 100% plugins, which is also slightly due because I just 5 months ago now already had my second daughter, which
Congratulations.
is just, thank you, one of the best things in life, but it puts the schedule on like under pressure cooker. So where I could normally like combine everything, I currently just have much less time and less energy as well because of the lack of sleep and stuff. And I don't know. Do you have kids?
I don't know.
Oh, no,
but,
okay, well, just don't sleep for a couple of nights and you'll know what I'm talking about.
I understand it's a big commitment.
It is, yeah. If you want a big commitment, do that. So like I've been doing a lot of plugin work, but I'm actually feeling like, especially when we start talking about creativity again, I'm like feeling this urge that I want to make music again. And I'm thinking about what I want that to be. And yeah, I'm really getting more, I feel like I'm getting more and more excited again to get a little bit back into active, like really active music making and pushing myself in the ways that I used to do, you know, in the ways that I know where you grow. Because one of the hardest things as you become more professional in music is that the growth is what makes things fun, you know. That's how I see it, at least. Like when you're a beginner, and that's in plugins and sports and whatever you do, like the growth is really fun. And the further you get along your career, in between quotation marks, the harder it becomes to grow. And that doesn't mean that I'm so good that I can't grow anymore. It might just mean that I've done it for such a long time that I don't have that fresh perspective anymore, where, anything that I used to read, like manuals of synthesizers and like freaking like watch and read anything I could get my hands on. But at a certain point you become a professional and it's like less of that and it's more of just making the thing, which is also great. But like actually having some perspective from this whole plugin thing, I'm getting more and more excited to apply some of the things I've learned there to like making music again.
That's cool. So it kind of builds a little bit. So rather than every day you're letting out some of that creative steam, now it's kind of building up a little bit. And when you get a chance to do it, you have some desire and direction.
I hope so, man. But it might like I already know, like when I did a session last week, I thought I was going to be way rustier than I actually was, but I know I'm going to be a little rusty. Like I know I'm going to be like, a basketball player getting back on the field after like a long vacation. Yeah, the first couple of days, I don't know, weeks of doing that, everything's going to kind of like feel floppy and you're not going to jump as easy as you thought you do. You're not going to be as fast as you thought you were, like it's going to be very frustrating. So that's going to be a whole challenge in itself, but I'm pretty excited to like get that going again.
Yeah. Well, I guess that's the way it is when we learn. Like when you first learn something, you're growing so fast, right? Like it's every new thing you learn like doubles your knowledge of what you already had. Right. Yeah. And then like, reading the manuals for synthesizers and you're taking in all this knowledge, but that has to kind of slow down at some point. And I think that is a point where a lot of people kind of lose interest when they stop learning. Because like you could read the manual for another synthesizer, but like, do you really need to know about oscillators again?
No.
Like you kind of got that thing under control.
Yeah.
So it can feel like you're stagnating, I guess.
Yeah.
And that nothing's really changing. There's not a lot of growth happening. And that can be frustrating.
Yeah. Yeah, no, exactly. And I don't know if this is for everybody, but at least for me, that feeling of growth and achieving things, whether it's your personal goals or goals out in the world, that is what makes things fun,
Yeah. Yeah, to see a little bit of progress, to see things happen.
Yeah. How much, like, how do you do that? Like, how much time do you spend making music? Like, do you have a schedule for that? Like, is it every hour you can do is in the studio? Like, how does that work for you?
Yeah. Well, here's the funny thing, right? Like when I'm working, when I've schooled, I'm teaching, I'm probably more productive, which is funny because I have less time. But when I go on to break, I'm on a break for this week and I'll say summer vacation, it just seems like I have so much time and it's not as precious, right? So I don't have to hustle to do things. And a lot of it gets wasted. I mean, I thought I was going to have like 4 albums done by this point of the week. And here I am, I've got like barely anything done. But it's funny that how like that helps motivate you, move you.
Yeah.
When you have that. So it's not so much that I have a schedule, but I know like when I get out from work, I got some time to work on stuff. So it might be producing this podcast. It might be working on some music. It might be building some sounds or something, whatever it might be. But I always try to make sure it's something.
Yeah.
I got kind of like with the podcast, it sort of has its deadline. I try to get one out every week.
Yeah.
I would like to be a little more disciplined with a lot of the other things too. I don't know why the podcast is easy for me to meet that goal for whatever reason. Just the regularity.
I mean, is it maybe like when, back to the gym analogies, like when the gym is really close to house, then you always leave quite late and then you don't go, whether when it's like an hour or like, nobody's gym's an hour away, but like a 15-minute ride, like then you actually have to plan it in and you have to do it. So like maybe your podcast involves setting up these meetings, you can't call your guests the day before, so you have to schedule it in advance and you have to set certain things in plan. I know this, I'm saying this because this is what happens to me all the time, like it's the things that have the flexibility that you actually then give the least attention, but they might be the most important thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a great point, because there's other people involved, right?
Yeah,
like
exactly.
Like we made this plan to be here at this time.
Yeah,
I can't be like, well,
yeah,
I'm gonna just kind of like lay around a little longer today.
Yeah, exactly. But
and then the release
funny.
of it too is like, people sat down and talked with me. I have to make it happen. If it's 6 months before this thing comes out, you're gonna be like, Brian, like, what the hell? What happened?
Yeah.
So
interesting.
That would be probably a really smart thing to just build into life, where there's hire somebody to just like yell at me.
Yeah, and if you find that person, give them my details. They can yell at me too.
Yeah, I got some referrals for you.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
that's funny. This idea, though, it doesn't have to be like making a plugin or something, but finding some other pursuit that you take up that will eat up some of your time, so that maybe, and this probably only works if you are really in the routine of making music constantly, and you need something to sort of give you some space to feel fresh about it again. I guess some sort of, could be some other art form, or like you're doing, like making a plugin or something, could be a really healthy way to stay productive and then feel rejuvenated when you return.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I think that is a healthy balance. Like, I've often in my life had two things going on at the same time, and like kind of stepping off one stone to step onto the next one. And, and it can mean stepping back and forth as well. And I think that's, for me at least, it's a healthy thing to have multiple things, because it can also be nice, like when the music thing is like super annoying, and then I think, oh, I'm going to do something on a plugin, and that can be really rewarding. And well, this got a little bit out of hand, but I mean, why not? Like, if it's possible, I think it can be a very healthy thing. A lot of people, like, I think, a lot of people, I sometimes I talk to people about music and what I do, and I know I'm super privileged to have been able to make music my job and my main thing. And I see sometimes, especially in beginners, like that envy of like, oh, I wish I could do music as my full-time thing. But I think, sometimes it's easy to forget how nice it can be to bounce back and forth, and lean on that wall that's your other thing, to be free in that thing that's your music. And because once it becomes a professional thing, there's a whole other pressures that you're going to have to deal with. So there's a lot of value in doing that back and forth between pursuits, maybe.
Yeah, I hear that a lot about. I've talked to people that say, like, I don't pick up my guitar and just strum it anymore.
Yeah.
Like, and, I know people that come home from work and just play their guitar. No point. It just goes out into the ether. It's relaxing. It's just pure nothing. And for me, like, a lot of times it's like, it's a means to an end. It's like, I'm trying to make a song. I'm trying to finish something. I'm trying to produce something. And that can be sometimes what you lose if you when you get into things professionally, when you make it a job or a business. And I think it's important to remember to keep that as part of it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And it's hard. Again, this is one of those things that, at least for me, that's an ongoing challenge of finding ways to deal with that, Yeah.
Well, let me ask you, like, are you going to be doing any touring anytime soon? Because I know you've done, like, you do the festival circuit, lots of big stages. I'm sure that's, I'm obviously thrilling, right? But does that ever also suffer from the same problem of here we go again, kind of.
Haha. Well, I definitely know that in the periods in time where I was touring a lot, there were also moments where you're like, oh man, it's hard to imagine, but when you are like, oh, I don't want to go, I don't necessarily want to go away again. Like don't get me wrong, being on stage, best thing there is. It's so amazing, so cool. But like the going and the traveling, that can be super taxing. I want to perform. Like, I love performing. I love being on stage. So it'll happen. It's not my main priority right now, but it'll happen. And like, I'll be super happy again to interact with fans and to be DJing. And yeah, it's just a whole nother level of excitement. But I just have so many things I want to do, like these plugins, and like Sub Ninja was only actually the very first thing that I wanted to release. I'm actually working on a much bigger thing as well, and I want to finish that, and I want to make awesome music, and then I got so many things I want to do at the same time. So I'm sure touring will be a part of my life again. But yeah, we'll see.
Yeah, I'm sure, especially new family member now. So
yep, that's
every
also
day is a new advancement at that age, right? Kind of like when we talk about learning music, like learning life. Every day is a giant step.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so I've played in bands and we've organized our own tours, very DIY punk rock, reaching out to other bands. Can you get us on a show in Pittsburgh? And like, yeah, okay, cool. We'll set you up here on New York.
Nice.
Kind of trading stuff, but we've organized some tours. And I mean, it's like you said, like playing that energy is hard to find anywhere else. That exchange when it's people are into it, you're into it. It's magic, and it's greater than the sum of its parts.
Yeah.
But all the stuff in between is very taxing. The travel, the bad food, the bad places to sleep, the floors we've slept on, the cars we've slept in. And I mean, it's an adventure, and it's a lot of fun in that way. But I kind of came away from that realizing like, I don't know. I don't know if this is what I want to do.
And that's a band, man. Like, I've often thought while I was packing my rolly case with my USB stick and headphones, oh my God, thank God I don't have to bring my guitars and all my other crap, Like DJs have it easy in that regard. But yeah, man, it's real. It's a crazy lifestyle. It's one of the coolest things you can do. But yeah, it's also wild. It's very wild.
Yeah. I loved it. I really did. It was so much fun, but I also kind of realized it's sort of against my nature too. I'm like, I've been off for 3 or 4 days now, and like, I took my dog to the vet one day.
That's the only reason you went. I was like, great.
I dropped off something at the post office, and I think I went to the grocery store. Like, that's all amazing. I've done, that's just my natural state is kind of a homebody person. So
I think a lot of producers actually are. Like, a lot of big DJs I've met around the world, they're also just like, yeah, man, we just like sitting in our studio, and like, that's what brings you there, funny enough.
Right. It's so solitary. It's interesting.
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
Especially when you think of the way music has always been, very communal. Like, if you wanted to hear music, some sort of ensemble, like, people had to play it together in the moment.
Yeah.
But only until even pretty recently in recording technology could we just do it by ourselves.
Yeah. Crazy, right? Yeah, I think in a way that also kind of is what I love so much about producing, and especially in terms of what's possible now. Like, you can just create this whole thing inside of a freaking computer. Like, you really don't need much else.
Yeah.
So that's so amazing.
Yeah, it's such a great time to be a musician.
Yeah.
But yeah, it can be.
And then AI
solitary.
is gonna ruin the game.
Are you afraid of that?
I don't know. We'll see. Yeah, I don't know. It's gonna have influences.
Sure. I
It's
think it
hard to
already has,
tell.
right?
Yeah, it's hard to tell what the influences will be. I mean, I think every generation is, or I can imagine every generation has certain fears around how the next generation is gonna like replace what they always did in an easier and faster way. And then, yeah, I'm sure there's tons of people that will be saying like, oh, I used to do this by hand, and it was so special and it was so great, and now it's done by machine, and yeah, it's kind of the same, but not really. So like, yeah, a lot of music that future people will be listening to will just be like, oh, give me music that sounds like this and that combined, and AI will roll that out for hours for you to enjoy. And I'll be saying like, yeah, but it has no soul and it's blah. Yeah, but like that's just kind of how things go, Like
Yeah.
we'll see. I don't know.
Yeah.
What's your take on it?
I don't know either exactly, but yeah, like you said, I mean, even if you take like, say I'm recording a guitar and I punch it in and I, overdub something, someone else might say like, but there's nothing like a straight performance straight through,
Yeah,
somebody played that the whole way. And I can see that. But if that's what I had to do every time, I'd never finish anything,
exactly.
or take a lot longer.
Exactly.
AI, I think will certainly, I'm excited for how it cleans up the more mundane things that we do, the things that we don't enjoy doing. Even some of like mixing tools. I like mixing. It's an art form and you can be very creative with it. But some of the technical stuff, like I was like, oh, I want to have my song,
Yeah.
So sometimes that becomes a little bit of a drag. So if they can help me with that stuff, that's nice. But I do think I'm kind of surprised it hasn't happened already, that people would be returning a little more towards like, everything's been so digital and perfect, and maybe like people will start getting into something more natural and human.
Yeah.
And maybe a little bit of like the lo-fi movement has some of that going on where people have embraced that a little. But I don't think any kind of AI will ever replace that sort of thing where an artist touches you and changes how you think, and you wear different clothes now because you're like kind of like looking up to them, and they influence like parts of the way you look at the world. And now I don't know if that happens as much as it used to either. Like when I was younger in high school, and that the people you listened to was your identity. Like you were waving a flag of like, this is who I am, kind of. I don't know if that happens quite as much anymore, at least from what I can observe. But I do think there'll, take like Taylor Swift right now. Like she's probably the most famous person in the world at the moment. And so much about her, she's a musician, right? But it's about her life, her experiences, what she's doing. And we'll never get that from AI. A lot of people, I think like a lot of her fans look up to her for who she is as a person. Some of the things she's done, like re-recording all her songs so that she could have the rights, like that's like power move right there. Like, can AI do that? Like, can AI inspire us that way? I don't know if that can ever, who knows, maybe it can, but I think that's stuff that maybe we need to lean into more, like take like your plugin, for instance, like the fact that it's like you made it, right? It's like, that's something that's really interesting to me about it. When I first came across it was like, oh, like he needed this, he wanted this, and this is what he saw as a whole, and he's making this kind of music, and it had like this story behind it. Whereas if it was like, say like an AI thing that figured it out for you or whatever, it's just, it doesn't have that same impact. I think that's I think it's really cool, actually, the way you've kind of like marketed the plugin, like from you, like, because a lot of stuff that you don't know who the creators are. It's like maybe it's a company, but that's all you get. You don't get like the kind of backstory. And I think that's a cool thing about what you have, that you need the human for that.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that. No, I think I relate to what you're saying, you know, like when you're a fan of a certain artist, it can be like they can sing Twinkle Twinkle Little Star and you're still interested in hearing that in their voice in a way, you know?
Yeah.
Like if you're a fan of Taylor Swift and she sang like the most mundane song, you'd still be curious, like, oh, how's she gonna say it, you know? So I do get that. I don't know. It's too hard to speculate about when we'll lose that to computers, though. It's a big subject. Yeah, I don't know. We'll see. I mean, I think as with anything, we'll probably still have some time to enjoy what we're doing right now, and it'll be a great tool for a while. But yeah, after 10 years, I don't know.
Yeah, and it's probably wise to get on board.
Yeah, of course.
Rather than fight it. Like it doesn't seem like it's like a tsunami, you know, like any recording technology. Like if you didn't embrace multi-track recording or overdubbing or like you just left in the dust.
Yeah. I've been trying to convince like some of my less tech savvy friends, like you need to get like a subscription to like ChatGPT. Like, I don't know if you're as adamant about this as I am, but I'm just telling them like, this is when we were in high school and we found out Google existed, you know? And then we were like, what the hell? This is Google. This is so great. You know, we need Google. It does everything for us. And currently, like everything starts, anytime you need something on the internet, it starts with Google. And that's going to be like the ChatGPTs of the future. And whenever somebody says to me like that is kind of like my age, oh, why do I need it? What do you use it for? Like, it's like Google. It's like you telling your parents, Mom, look, this is what Google does.
Right.
That's to me what these tools are going to do. And you definitely need to use them. Like, and if you're wondering why you need them, maybe you need to do more research on why they could be useful to you, you know?
Yeah, like trying to explain to your folks, like, this is the entire encyclopedia and more.
Exactly, yeah.
This is the Britannica, that whole set of books. This is the library right here.
Yeah, exactly.
It's really interesting. There's a lot of great applications. I'll tell you what, even like for my job as an English teacher, I have the same mug as you, the Office.
You're an Office fan?
Yeah.
Nice.
I don't have it right now, but you probably see it in other episodes.
Oh, cool.
That's funny. The world's best boss.
Yes. I once had somebody ask me, like, they would just kind of thought, like, why do you have that mug? You know, and I've wondered if people don't get it, like, if they thought, like, why do I have that mug? It's kind of weird, but I'm glad you get it.
Yeah. Didn't he say he bought it at Spencer's for himself too?
Yes, yeah, he did. Yeah,
that's so funny.
Great. Yeah.
What I was saying, as an English teacher, I've used it, and my students have certainly used it to write their papers. And so I've used it to create like worksheets. Like, say we're doing some kind of grammatical thing or some kind of vocabulary thing or whatever it is. I can ask it to make the questions for me. I can ask it to write a story about a dog that meets a dragon and leave a blank space for all the verbs. Yeah. So like they have to film, like whatever, you know? And to get it to do that frees up so much more of my time to actually focus on like the stuff I as a human can do with them.
Exactly.
Compared to me sitting there and like writing questions out and typing, like, which is, you know, that's not my specialty. That's not what I'm here for. You know, I'm not just giving out handouts to my classes. So like getting help with that sort of stuff is really huge. You know, I get papers written by ChatGPT, you know, and I read them, and at first I'm like, wow, I'm really getting through to these guys.
Ah.
You know, Johnny's become such a better writer. I must really be doing a good job. Then you're like, wait, I'm not that good. um, but you know, that there's that, of course.
So
But
how do you guys deal with that?
well, that's where I think it gets interesting, right? Because if you can plug that into chat, if you can plug my essay into Chat GPT and it gives you like a great answer, then maybe I have a problem with my question. You know, maybe the stuff that I'm asking is outdated,
Hmm.
right? Just like, you know, our teachers when I was younger, like telling us, like, you know, you're never going to have a calculator with you all the time. You have to learn this. And now we've got phones that have calculators all the time with us, right?
Yeah.
Like, so that's kind of you know, use the tools we have, right? So maybe we're asking questions that are too easily answered in a formulaic way. So to combat that, it has to, I need more personal stuff. I need you to
Hmm.
think about you and your experience in your life, because that's not in ChatGPT. That's not in the
Interesting.
internet. And that's hard. That's very tricky, but I think maybe education in general kind of needs that little kick in the ass, because a lot of the testing we have to do, you know, the state tests and stuff they're so predictable, you know,
Hmm.
and you wind up teaching them in like a certain way. Like I say to my classes all the time, I would never teach you this is how to write.
Hmm.
I'm teaching you how to be smarter than this test.
Hmm.
Because if they're going to ask you the same thing the same way every time, let's be ready. You know, if
Hmm.
you were on a team and you knew the other team was going to run the exact play every time, wouldn't you
Hmm.
prepare for that and
Yeah.
outsmart them? So it's kind of like what I'm teaching in that case is more like how to outsmart the test. It's like a
Yeah.
strategy, which I don't think is bad, but it's not writing, it's not reading, it's not English skills.
Yeah.
So maybe we need to figure out more clever ways to do that sort of stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. I think for education, it can be such a gift. I think in the beginning it will be a little bit of a curse because, yeah, like I remember when I was in high school, there was this website that had summaries of books. And like when
Hmm.
I found that, I was like, no, I'm never going to have to read a boring book again,
Yeah.
you know? Um,
And
but
that's
like
great
imagine,
if that's great if I'm asking like what color shoes was he wearing? And like,
yeah,
you know, but if I want to know something a little deeper about like what this says about humanity and how does this apply to your life as a musician,
yeah.
like that's now you have to
ChatGPT would
think.
struggle with questions like that.
Well, it doesn't know you.
But what if I gave it some information about me and
Well,
would
then
say like answer the question from the
yeah,
perspective of a producer?
yeah. Well, that's part of what you can do. Yeah, you can start,
Yeah.
and
So I
that
don't mean to give your students, if they're listening, any
no, but
ideas.
in a way, I think that's at least. I'd rather them do that than just
Yeah.
get the first thing it spits out,
Yeah.
right? You know, I'd rather them think about it and look at it and question it, and you know,
Yeah.
but yeah, like maybe some of this stuff isn't as necessary anymore. I don't
Yeah.
know. So, but a big thing I've been doing more of is like, and this is especially with, I teach students that are learning English. So a lot of them are families, immigrant families, and they're first generation learning English. And their big advantage is that they speak two languages.
Hmm.
So really want to lean into that with them. But
Hmm.
it doesn't matter if you can't speak in front of people. So
Hmm.
that's what you're going to do. You're going to present this. You're going to speak. You're going
Yeah.
to do things in real life that a computer can't do for you.
Yeah.
Um, and yeah, like, I don't know, like if I use it to like write my artist bio, like I don't see a problem with that because that's not what I'm here for. I'm not here to
Yeah.
like write a cool bio. I want you to listen to my music, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Absolutely. Absolutely.
if I'm
Yeah.
wasting time like writing a bio, you know,
Yeah.
that's like this. I don't know. I have a lot of mixed feelings, I guess, but overall, it's like it doesn't matter how I feel. It's what's happening. So we got to figure out how to work with it.
Yeah. Fair enough. Yeah. Fair enough.
What are you thinking? Do you think Are you?
I mean, I like on the one side, I'm completely on board with the idea of why do I need to learn math if I have a calculator?
Uh-huh.
You know, that's great. Why do I need to know like 6 times 6 is 36 if I have a calculator? But I do also think on the other side that learning those math things like the tables, I don't know what you call it in English,
Yeah,
but
the multiplication tables.
yeah, multiplication tables. That's also just a good practice to get your brain working in the first place.
Mm.
And in the second place, also a good practice to get a feel for numbers. And I was actually, funny enough, having a thing with my wife last night. She wanted to calculate something, and you know, like, well, I'm a little bit of a geek, and like I like numbers. I always loved math and stuff, and she asked me how to do this math thing, and I was like, okay, I was trying to explain to her how to do it and how to figure it out herself, and she was totally fine. Like she could totally do it, but I can definitely see a world in which people lose some of those basic skills, and then you can only do it with a calculator.
Yeah.
You know, like, and like, how are you gonna know that the calculator is right? You know, like if you hit the wrong button and 6 times 6 is not 36, but like
360.
something completely different. Yeah. Then you're like, yeah. Did you say 63?
360. I said.
Yeah. Okay. Exactly.
Similar
360.
idea.
Exactly. Great. Yeah. Or 63. You know, like, hey, something went wrong in this transaction. You know, it is nice to have some of those skills. And yeah, it's a big challenge, I think, for education to find the balance, because I also see a great tool in things like ChatGPT to help people learn things. Like you could have so much more one-on-one time with a knowledgeable chat bot than you could have one-on-one with the teacher, you know. And then, like you said, you could focus even more on the kids that really need that extra human attention from you, the teacher. So it can be like a really great gift if it's used the right way as well, I think.
Mm.
But I don't think it's necessarily good to completely lose all the like more basic abilities.
Yeah. Well, I think a lot
It's
of
a
the
tough
stuff
one.
I learned in my math classes, for instance, most of which I've never had to use again, you know, most of which but I learned problem solving.
Exactly.
I learned how to think through these equations. And I think that helps in a lot of other areas in life. And,
Yeah.
you know, I think we've been talking about this a lot with music, how you kind of learn, like you're learning stuff through making a plugin that's applying to music making, even though it's not
Exactly.
directly. And I'm sure some of your approaches to music making correlated nicely to making this plugin.
100%.
It's thinking, it's mental workouts, like you said, just figuring out those familiarity with numbers, and that's an important thing, that we exercise our brain. I mean, that's why they say like you got to do like crossword puzzles as you get older, and Sudoku and all these things, just to keep the mind fresh, because it's kind of like a muscle that will atrophy.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
So that might be why we feel rusty when we take breaks.
Yes.
But sometimes the rust is good. I don't know. Like you said earlier, the advice doesn't apply all the time, every time.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
The trick is knowing
you gotta,
when it applies.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
Well, listen, I know you've got bedtime duties coming up, so I don't want to keep you from that. I don't want to get in trouble, get you in trouble. So we can definitely send people to dsp.thehymn.com to check out Sub Ninja, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm going to have these links in the show notes as well. But
awesome.
I think it's a really cool plugin that does something that I don't really know of any other tool that does. It's very specific for getting like the bass stuff right. And it's also just like I kind of said earlier about like how I used to look at the EQ spectrum on songs. I just think it's interesting to see, because I noticed when looking at Sub Ninja, like with things like side chaining, like sometimes you dial in the release just right, and suddenly now it's pumping in that way that's rhythmic, that fits the music, and you can kind of see it with the way you've got like the grid lines in there.
Yeah.
It's great reference for like that education too.
Yeah.
So I think it's pretty
Awesome,
cool.
man. Thank you. I appreciate that.
Anywhere else you want to send people?
No, yeah, go check out Sub Ninja and the hymn on Spotify and Instagram and wherever you want to find me. We've started a Discord for people that are interested in Sub Ninja and just also chatting about music production stuff that you can all find on the site. So yeah, reach out to me.
That's awesome, man. I congratulate you on, jumping into this whole other realm and following through. And it seems like it's been a successful release. I see like some of your testimonials are names I recognize. Tom Frampton. I see that you passed the snake oil test with
Pretty
White
crazy,
Sea
right?
Studio,
Yeah.
which is an accomplishment.
Yeah, I was extremely proud of that. Yeah.
Yeah, that's great, man.
Yeah.
But I understand why. It's good stuff. And
Thank you so much.
It's hard to find something new, like these days, like there's so many different types of plugins and you've kind of found something that wasn't really covered. So
yeah,
that's an accomplishment in and of itself, and to follow through with it, even better. So, I wish you lots of success with it, and I'm excited to find out what's next. And
yeah, man, I'll let you know.
I encourage everyone listening to check it out.
Thank you so much, Brian. This was really, really fun. Great conversation.
Cool. Thank you.
Cheers.
Thank you for listening to the Music Production Podcast. If you want to help support the show, the best thing you can do is tell a friend, someone you think that would enjoy the show. I'd also love it if you could leave a review wherever you get your podcasts. And if you want to support my work, you can go to brianfunk.com. I've got tons of Ableton Live packs, tutorials, samples. You can check out my book, The 5-Minute Music Producer, which gives you 365 short music-making activities to help you get started, stay inspired, and finish more music. And there's also the Music Production Club, where you get my latest releases as soon as they're finished. It gives you access to a community of like-minded people who are making music and sharing ideas. You can share your music, find new collaborators, and participate in our live meetings where we set up some kind of musical challenge and then make music together and share our results at the end. That's the Music Production Club. It's a lot of fun, and you can find that and everything that I do at brianfunk.com. Thanks again for listening to the show, and have a great day.